The elevator cable snapped somewhere above my head with a sound like a guitar string breaking in slow motion. For exactly 3 seconds, I experienced true weightlessness as the emergency brakes failed to engage. My laptop slid across the floor. The fluorescent lights flickered. And through it all, I heard Damien's laugh echoing from his office down the hall where I'd left him 15 minutes ago. The kind of laugh that comes easy when you think you're untouchable. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. When the backup systems finally caught with a grinding shriek that set my teeth on edge, I was pressed against the elevator wall, my heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. The lights died completely. Emergency power kicked in with a red glow that made everything look like a crime scene. Maintenance malfunction, a robotic voice announced in German-accented English through the intercom. Please remain calm. Repairs estimate 45 minutes. 45 minutes trapped in a disabled elevator in the Steinmetz building. The gleaming testament to Hamburg's financial district that my fiancé had chosen for his company's headquarters, specifically because it impressed the right people. I leaned my head back against the cold metal and laughed, the sound sharp and slightly unhinged in the confined space. Of course, this would happen 20 minutes before the most important investor meeting of Damien's career. The meeting where he planned to secure 12 million euros from Eisenhart Capital Group. The meeting where he'd specifically told me to stay home because these German investors are old-fashioned, Sophie. They prefer to discuss serious business with serious people. Serious people. Not his fiancé, who worked as his executive assistant, which was code for scheduling his meetings, organizing his travel, and pretending not to notice when he took credit for other people's work. My phone had no signal in the steel coffin. Perfect. I pulled out my tablet instead, the one Damien didn't know existed, the one connected to a private network he'd never access. The screen illuminated my face in cold blue light as I pulled up the security feed from his office. There he was, my beloved, pacing in front of the windows that overlooked the Ulster, rehearsing his pitch to 3 men in impeccably tailored suits. I turned up the volume, grateful for the sophisticated surveillance system I'd had installed 6 months ago when I'd first started suspecting that Damien's business ethics were as flexible as his fidelity. Completely under control, Damien was saying, running his hand through his artfully tousled blonde hair. He did that when he was nervous, when the cracks in his confidence started showing. She has no idea about any of it. Honestly, gentlemen, American women are remarkably easy to manage if you know which buttons to push. American women. I felt my jaw clench. I'd been born in Stuttgart, spent the first 12 years of my life in Baden-Württemberg before my father's work brought us to the States. But Damien had decided early in our relationship that my German heritage didn't fit the narrative he was building, so he'd simply erased it. Introduced me as Sophie Barrett, all-American girl, daughter of a small-town factory worker. He wasn't entirely wrong about my father working in a factory. He just had the scale wrong by about 3,000 employees and a production capacity of industrial machinery that got exported to 47 countries. Und die Familie? One of the investors, Tobias Eisenhart, the silver-haired patriarch of the Eisenhart Empire, asked in German. His voice carried the crisp authority of old money and older expectations. And the family? Damien's face went carefully blank, the way it always did when confronted with a language barrier he couldn't manipulate. He didn't speak German. didn't speak anything except English and what he called business Japanese, which consisted of 3 phrases he'd memorized to impress clients from Tokyo. "I apologize," Damien said smoothly, his smile never wavering. "My German is unfortunately quite limited. Could we continue in English?" "Natürlich," Tobias replied, switching languages with the ease of the truly educated. "Of course. I was asking about your fiancé's family. You mentioned she comes from humble circumstances?" The pause before humble was deliberate, weighted with the kind of skepticism that money recognizes in its own kind. "Very humble," Damien confirmed, warming to his subject now. This was one of his favorite topics: how he'd rescued me from mediocrity, how I should be grateful for his attention, how he was doing me a favor by marrying me despite my obvious lack of social standing. Her father works in manufacturing, assembly line level. Her mother never went to college. They're simple people, you understand. Good hearts, but no ambition, no vision for anything beyond their small-town life. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in. I watched through the tablet screen as Tobias exchanged glances with his companions. The younger man on his right, Stefan, his nephew and the company's CFO, raised an eyebrow. The woman on his left, Margaret, the director of venture investments, pressed her lips together in what might have been amusement or disgust. They knew. Of course they knew. The question was how much, and how they'd planned to use that knowledge. "Verstehe," Tobias said slowly, settling back in his chair. "I understand." Then, deliberately, he continued in German, his eyes fixed on Damien's face. "Und sie weiß nichts über ihre anderen Unternehmungen? And she knows nothing about your other ventures?" Damien smiled that empty smile of his, the one he used when he had no idea what was being said but wanted to appear engaged. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that in English?" Tobias didn't repeat it. Instead, he turned to Stefan and said, Ist genau so arrogant, wie ihr berichtet habt. Fast schon beeindruckend." "He's exactly as arrogant as you reported. Almost impressive." Stefan's laugh was soft and dangerous. "Die Frage ist, wie lange lassen wir ihn weitermachen?" The question is, how long do we let him continue? "Bis Sophie bereit ist," Margaret answered, her eyes finding the security camera in the corner of the room. "Finding me. Until Sophie is ready." My heart stopped. They knew about the camera. They knew I was watching. They knew. The elevator lurched suddenly, beginning its descent. The emergency lights flickered back to normal fluorescence. The robotic voice returned. "Service restored. We apologize for the inconvenience." I had maybe 2 minutes before the elevator reached the lobby. 2 minutes before I had to decide whether to run up the stairs to that office and confront Damien, or whether to play this out the way I'd been planning for the past 6 months. My phone buzzed as signal returned. A message from an unknown number. "Lobby. Black Mercedes. We need to talk. T.E. Tobias Eisenhart." The elevator doors opened to the marble expanse of the building's lobby, all glass and steel in the kind of aggressive modernity that Hamburg's financial district wore like armor. I stepped out, my heels clicking against the floor with a confidence I'd spent 18 months learning to hide. The black Mercedes idled at the curb, sleek and powerful and expensive in a way that made Damien's leased BMW look like a child's toy. The back door opened. Tobias Eisenhart looked at me from the leather interior, his expression unreadable. Frau Lindner, he said, using my real name. My German name. The one I'd stopped using when my father decided that American business would be easier without the weight of European identity. I believe we have much to discuss about your fiancé's rather creative approach to investor relations. I could have walked away. Could have gone back upstairs, interrupted the meeting, caused a scene. Could have let Damien continue to dig his own grave with his arrogance and his lies, and his absolute certainty that he was the smartest person in any room. Instead, I got in the car. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The leather was butter soft and probably cost more than my monthly rent. Tobias handed me a folder as the car pulled smoothly into traffic. "I'm sure you've done your own research," he said in German, "but perhaps ours is more comprehensive." I opened the folder. Inside were financial records, emails, photographs. Evidence of things I'd suspected but hadn't been able to prove. Damien meeting with competitors. Damien selling proprietary technology that didn't belong to him. Damien systematically looting the company he'd built on other people's innovation and my family's initial seed money. "How long have you known?" I asked, also in German. It felt like slipping into an old coat, comfortable and familiar, and right in a way that English never quite managed. 3 months, Margaret answered from the front passenger seat. She turned to look at me, her gray eyes sharp with intelligence and what might have been approval. "We were conducting due diligence on Herr Whitmore's company when certain inconsistencies emerged. Further investigation revealed that the mysterious American investor who provided the initial capital was actually Lindner Industrial Partners." "My father's company," I said softly. "Your company," Tobias corrected. "According to our research, you've been the managing director since your 25th birthday. Your father officially retired 2 years ago, though he remains chairman of the board." I closed the folder, processing this. They'd done their homework. The question was why they were sharing it with me instead of simply walking away from the deal. Eisenhart Capital Group didn't need Damien's mediocre technology or his stolen innovations. They certainly didn't need the complications that came with investing in a company built on fraud. "Why are you here?" I asked directly. "Why not just decline the investment and move on?" "Because," Tobias said, "we don't like being lied to. And because Margaret's daughter attended university with you. Do you remember Katrin Eisenhart?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Katrin. My roommate during my year abroad at Mannheim, before I'd transferred to finish my degree in Boston. Katrin with her wild laugh and her father's gray eyes and her absolute intolerance for injustice. "She speaks very highly of you," Margaret continued. "When your name appeared in our investigation, she was quite insistent that we look deeper into the situation. She seemed to believe that you were not a willing participant in Herr Whitmore's schemes." "She was right," I said quietly. "So we gathered," Tobias replied. "The question is, what do you intend to do about it?" The car turned onto Lombardsbrücke, following the curve of the Ulster. Through the tinted windows, I could see couples walking along the waterfront, tourists taking photographs, street musicians playing for spare change. Normal people living normal lives, unburdened by the weight of betrayal and broken trust. "Tell me," I said, "if you were in my position, what would you do?" Stefan laughed from his position beside his uncle. "We're Germans, Frau Lindner. We would document everything, build an airtight legal case, and destroy him systematically and thoroughly. But we're told that Americans prefer their revenge served with more drama. I'm German-American, I corrected, which means I want the documentation and the drama. Tobias's smile was approving. Excellent. Then perhaps we can discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. The car pulled up outside a restaurant I recognized. Herlin, 2 Michelin stars, the kind of place where deals worth millions were negotiated over wine that cost more than some people's cars. Damien had taken me here once, on our 6-month anniversary, and spent the entire evening on his phone while I sat across from him pretending I didn't notice. "We have a table," Margaret said, "and approximately 90 minutes before Herr Whitmore's presentation is scheduled to end. I suggest we use that time wisely." Inside, the restaurant was hushed elegance and soft lighting. We were led to a private room, away from the main dining area, where a table was already set for 4. The maitre d' disappeared, and we were alone with white tablecloths and silverware that gleamed like surgical instruments. "The situation is this," Tobias began without preamble. "Your fiancé approached us 6 months ago, seeking investment for his company, Novatech Solutions. He presented impressive projections, revolutionary technology, and a compelling narrative about disrupting the medical diagnostics industry. All built on technology he stole from actual innovators," I said flatly. "Precisely," Margaret confirmed. "3 former employees have contacted us separately, all telling similar stories. Herr Whitmore brought them into the company, extracted their research and ideas, then forced them out before they could claim any ownership. The patents are filed in his name, but the actual work was done by people who are no longer with the company, and who received minimal compensation for their contributions," Stefan added, pulling out his own tablet. "We've been building a case file. Would you like to see?" He turned the screen toward me. Names, faces, timelines. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, whose breakthrough in rapid blood analysis formed the foundation of Novatech's primary product. Benjamin Foster, whose coding architecture powered the diagnostic software. Priya Chandran, whose clinical research provided the medical validation Damien needed to approach investors. All gone. All erased from the company's official history. All replaced with Damien's narrative of singular genius and visionary leadership. He told them I was just the secretary, I said, the words tasting like ash. Told them I was there to handle scheduling and correspondence while he did the real work. Yes, Tobias said gently. He's been quite consistent in that narrative. Several of our preliminary conversations included disparaging remarks about your intelligence and capabilities. He seemed to believe that diminishing you would somehow elevate him in our estimation. It should have hurt more than it did. But I'd been listening to Damien's subtle put-downs for 18 months now. The gentle corrections in public. The patient explanations of things I already understood. The way he'd take my ideas and present them as his own, then act surprised when I mentioned having suggested them first. He proposed to me 6 months ago, I said quietly, right after I told him about my father's company. Before that, he'd been talking about wanting to keep things casual, about how marriage was an outdated institution. Then, suddenly, he couldn't wait to put a ring on my finger. Because he saw dollar signs, Stefan said bluntly. According to our research, Lindner Industrial Partners has a market valuation of approximately 4 billion euros. Even a small connection to that kind of money would open doors for him. He thinks I'm estranged from my family, I explained. I let him think that. Told him we had a falling out. that I was making my own way in the world without their help. He seemed to like that narrative. The poor little rich girl who rejected her family's fortune to find her own path. And meanwhile, Margaret said, you were funding his company through shell corporations and intermediary investment firms. Someone had to keep it afloat, I admitted. At first, I genuinely believed in what he was trying to build. The technology is sound, even if he didn't develop it himself. The medical applications are revolutionary. Rapid diagnostic testing that can be done with a simple finger prick results in under 2 minutes. Accuracy rates above 95%. It could save millions of lives in areas without access to traditional medical facilities. But, Tobias prompted. But then I started noticing discrepancies. Money going missing. Patents being filed that referenced research I knew Damien hadn't done. People leaving the company abruptly, always with NDAs and severance packages that seemed designed more to silence than to compensate. I started investigating. Found out about Dr. Tanaka, about Benjamin, about Priya. Found out that my fiancé was a thief and a fraud who'd built his empire on other people's brilliance. The waiter appeared with wine, a Riesling from the Mosel Valley, crisp and perfect. We waited until he'd poured and disappeared again before continuing. So why did you stay? Stefan asked. It wasn't accusatory, just curious. Why not expose him immediately? Because I wanted to understand the full scope of it, I said. Wanted to know everyone involved, every lie told, every dollar stolen. Wanted to make sure that when I took him down, he couldn't weasel out of it, or shift the blame or charm his way into a lesser punishment. I wanted it to be thorough and complete and utterly devastating. Tobias raised his glass in a small salute. Sehr Deutsch, he said approvingly. Very German. And very satisfying, Margaret added. But you'll need help. Taking down someone like Herr Whitmore requires resources, connections, and, most importantly, the element of surprise. He still thinks you're the naive secretary, yes? He does, I confirmed. I've been very careful to maintain that image. No sudden displays of competence, no challenging his authority, no revealing that I understand German or business or any of the things he's convinced himself I'm too simple to grasp. Perfect, Stefan said. Then we have an opportunity here. Herr Whitmore is expecting us to hand him 12 million euros this afternoon. What if we do exactly that? I stared at him. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm quite serious, he replied, his smile sharp. We give him the money, with conditions, of course. Conditions that will give us complete oversight of his operations, access to all financial records, seats on the board, approval authority for major decisions. We essentially take control of his company while letting him think he's won. And then, I asked, though I was beginning to see the shape of the plan. And then we audit everything, Margaret said. Forensic accounting, legal review, patent investigation. We document every instance of fraud, every stolen innovation, every person he's cheated. We build a case so airtight that he can't possibly escape. And when we're ready, we destroy him. Using his own company as the weapon, Tobias finished. It's elegant, really. He gets exactly what he wanted. The investment, the validation, the feeling of having succeeded. And then it all comes crashing down, with witnesses and documentation and no possible avenue for appeal. What about the victims? I asked. Dr. Tanaka and the others. What happens to them? They get justice, Stefan said firmly. Part of our conditions will be a complete review of all intellectual property claims. When we find evidence that patents were fraudulently obtained, we'll ensure proper attribution is restored. The actual innovators will receive compensation, recognition, and, if they want it, positions in the restructured company. Restructured company? I repeated. Margaret nodded. Novatech Solutions has value, even if its founder doesn't. The technology is sound, the market potential is enormous, and the medical applications are exactly as revolutionary as you described. Once Herr Whitmore is removed, the company could be rebuilt under proper leadership. Leadership that actually respects and compensates its innovators. Leadership like me, I said slowly, understanding dawning. If you want it, Tobias confirmed. Though I suspect your father's company would also be interested in acquisition. Either way, the company survives, the technology reaches the people who need it, and the actual creators get their due. Herr Whitmore, meanwhile, faces fraud charges, patent violations, and civil suits from multiple parties. He'll be lucky if he avoids prison. It was perfect. It was exactly what I'd been hoping for without quite knowing how to achieve it. The complete and total destruction of everything Damien had built on lies, combined with justice for the people he'd wronged and preservation of the actually valuable work they'd created. There's one problem, I said. Damien expects me to be at home right now, waiting anxiously for news of his meeting. If I'm here, if he sees me with you, the whole pretense collapses. Does he know you're in the building? Stefan asked. No. I came in to drop off some documents he forgot. I was supposed to leave immediately. Then you did leave, Margaret said. Our driver will take you home. You'll be there, playing the supportive fiancé, when Herr Whitmore calls to share his good news. You'll congratulate him, celebrate with him, continue to play your role. Meanwhile, we'll be implementing phase 1 of our plan, the investment with conditions. And when do I get to stop pretending? I asked. When do I get to look him in the eye and tell him exactly what kind of man he is? Tobias's smile was cold. All in good time, Frau Lindner. All in good time. First, we let him think he's won. Let him celebrate. Let him feel invincible. Let him make more mistakes. The more secure he feels, the more careless he'll become. And when he's at the very height of his confidence, when he thinks nothing can touch him, that's when we pull the rug out. How long? I pressed. 3 months, Stefan said. Maybe 4. Long enough to document everything, to ensure all legal matters are properly handled, to coordinate with the victims, and prepare them to testify if necessary. Long enough to build a case that's absolutely unbreakable. 3 months of pretending. 3 months of smiling and playing dumb, and watching Damien take credit for other people's work. 3 months of biting my tongue while he made jokes about my intelligence, and dismissed my opinions and treated me like a pretty accessory to his genius. But then, complete victory. Total vindication. Justice for everyone he'd wronged, and a future for the company that didn't depend on fraud and theft. I'll do it, I said, on one condition. Name it, Tobias said. When the time comes, I want to be the one who tells him. I want to be in the room when everything falls apart. I want him to know that I knew, that I was never the fool he thought I was, that his entire empire was built on sand and I was the ocean waiting to sweep it away. Margaret laughed, delighted. Katrin was right about you. You do have a gift for dramatic timing. Is that a yes? I asked. That's a yes, Tobias confirmed, extending his hand. Welcome to the team, Frau Lindner. Now, let's discuss the specific terms of our investment and exactly how we're going to make Herr Whitmore wish he'd never heard of Eisenhart Capital Group. We spent the next hour planning. The terms of the investment were aggressive but not unusual for this type of deal. 20% equity, 3 board seats, monthly financial reporting, approval required for any expenditure over 50,000 euros. What made them devastating was the forensic accounting clause buried in the fine print. Eisenhart Capital Group would have the right to audit any and all company records, with full access to financial documentation, employee files, and patent applications. Damien would sign it. He'd sign anything to get that 12 million euros. And in doing so, he'd hand us every tool we needed to dismantle his empire brick by brick. "There's one more thing," I said as the meeting wound down. "His presentation. What are you going to tell him?" "The truth," Stefan said with a slight smile. "That we're impressed with the technology, enthusiastic about the market potential, and eager to invest in Novatech Solutions' future. We'll praise his vision, his leadership, his innovative approach. We'll make him feel like the genius he thinks he is. And he'll never suspect," Margaret added, "that we're about to become his worst nightmare." The driver took me home to the apartment Damien and I shared in Winter Hued, an upscale neighborhood where the rent consumed most of my supposed secretary's salary. Damien had chosen it, of course, for its proximity to the office and its impressive address. I'd paid for it through one of my family's many subsidiaries, another detail he'd never bothered to investigate. The apartment was empty when I arrived, as I'd known it would be. Damien wouldn't leave his meeting early, not when he was this close to securing the investment he'd been chasing for months. I had time to change clothes, to hide away my tablet and any evidence of my morning's activities, to transform back into Sophie the secretary, Sophie the fiancé, Sophie the woman who would be so proud of her brilliant husband-to-be. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and barely recognized myself. When had I started slouching? When had I learned to make my eyes go slightly vacant, to arrange my features in an expression of pleasant confusion? When had I mastered the art of being underestimated? 18 months ago, I'd been Sophie Lindner, director of Lindner Industrial Partners, holder of 2 graduate degrees, speaker of 4 languages, and widely regarded as one of the most promising young executives in the European manufacturing sector. Now I was Sophie Barrett, secretary, fiancée, woman whose greatest achievement was efficiently managing her boss's calendar. The transformation had been gradual. At first, I'd simply held back some of my knowledge, let Damien explain things I already understood, allowed him to feel smart and capable. Then I'd started dressing differently, less professional, more casual, nothing that would intimidate. I'd changed my speech patterns, using simpler words, asking more questions, deferring to his expertise. I'd erased my LinkedIn profile, stopped attending industry events, become invisible in all the ways that mattered. And Damien had loved it, had thrived on being the smart one, the successful one, the one with vision and ambition. He'd been perfectly happy to have a pretty supportive fiancé who made him look good without challenging his authority or threatening his ego. The irony was that I'd learned this strategy from watching my mother. Annalisa Lindner, who'd spent 30 years in corporate boardrooms watching men underestimate her, had taught me early that there was power in being underestimated. "Let them think you're weak," she'd said once, over coffee in our Stuttgart kitchen when I was home from university. "Let them think you're naive or simple or just lucky. And while they're not taking you seriously, you can work without interference. Then, when the moment is right, you show them exactly who you are, The shock alone is worth the wait. I'd thought I understood what she meant. Now, preparing to play out this charade for 3 more months, I was beginning to truly comprehend the discipline it required, the patience, the willingness to endure small humiliations for the sake of eventual victory. My phone rang. Damien's name flashed on the screen, accompanied by the photo I'd taken of him 6 months ago, smiling, confident, completely unaware that his fiancé was already documenting his crimes. "Hello?" I answered, injecting just the right note of hopeful anxiety into my voice. "Sophie, baby, you won't believe it." His excitement was genuine, undiluted by any awareness of the trap he'd just walked into. "They said yes! Eisenhart Capital Group is investing 12 million euros in Novatech. We did it." We. As if I'd contributed anything beyond scheduling the meeting and printing the presentation materials. "That's wonderful," I gushed, playing my part perfectly. "I'm so proud of you. I knew they'd see how brilliant your work is." "This is going to change everything," he continued, his words tumbling over each other in his rush to share the news. "They want to move fast. Due diligence, contract signing, the whole process. Tobias Eisenhart himself said he believes in my vision. Can you believe it? One of the most powerful investors in Europe believes in me." "Of course I can believe it," I said warmly. "You're amazing, Damien. This is everything you've worked for." "We need to celebrate," he decided. "I'm leaving the office now. Let's go to Haarlem tonight. Somewhere nice, somewhere worthy of this moment. Wear that blue dress I like, the one that makes you look so pretty." The blue dress that I'd bought for our anniversary dinner. The one he'd barely noticed because he'd been too busy on his phone making deals. The one that made me look pretty but not threatening. Attractive, but not powerful. "I'll make a reservation," I offered. "What time?" 8 o'clock. "And Sophie?" His voice softened, became almost tender. "Thank you for believing in me. I know I've been stressed lately, maybe not as attentive as I should be, but this investment, this changes our future together." "I can't wait," I said, and meant it more than he could possibly know. After we hung up, I stood in our apartment's living room and allowed myself exactly 3 minutes of honest emotion. Anger, betrayal, grief for the relationship I'd thought we had, the man I'd thought he was. Determination to see this through, to make sure he faced consequences for everything he'd done. Then I locked it all away and called Haarlem. Made a reservation for 2 at 8 o'clock, requested a quiet table, confirmed that yes, we were celebrating a special occasion. I pulled out the blue dress, the one that made me look pretty and harmless, and hung it on the bedroom door. My tablet buzzed with an encrypted message from Stefan. Contracts being drafted. He signed preliminary agreement without reading it. This is going to be easier than we thought. Of course he'd signed without reading it. Damien never read the fine print, never questioned his own brilliance, or suspected that anyone might be smarter than him. It was one of his defining characteristics, the arrogance that made him simultaneously successful and vulnerable. I typed back, "Keep me updated. Playing the excited fiancé tonight at dinner." "Enjoy the performance," Stefan replied. "And Sophie? Katrine says hello. She's very much looking forward to attending the final meeting when we reveal everything." Katrine, my old friend, who I'd lost touch with when I'd started dating Damien and he'd systematically isolated me from my European connections. Who'd somehow known I needed help and had activated her family's resources to investigate. I made a mental note to call her once this was over, to rebuild the friendship I'd sacrificed on the altar of Damien's ego. The afternoon dragged. I cleaned the already clean apartment, reviewed the documents Eisenhart Capital had shared, and mentally rehearsed my role for the evening ahead. Proud girlfriend, supportive partner, woman who had no idea that the celebration was actually a funeral for her fiancé's ill-gotten empire. At 7:30, I was ready. Blue dress, simple jewelry, makeup that enhanced without overwhelming. Hair down the way Damien liked it, not up in the professional twist I'd favored before meeting him. I looked exactly like what I was pretending to be. A secretary lucky enough to be marrying her successful boss. The reflection in the mirror smiled back at me, empty and perfect. Damien arrived home at 7:45 in a cloud of expensive cologne and triumph. He swept me into a kiss that tasted like champagne and victory, his hands possessive on my waist. "Look at you," he murmured appreciatively. "My beautiful girl. Tonight is going to be perfect." "Tell me everything," I said as we headed to the restaurant in his leased BMW. "What did they say? How did the presentation go? Were they impressed?" He was more than happy to recount every detail, editing reality to make himself look even better than he had. In his version, Tobias Eisenhart had been immediately captivated by his genius. The technology had spoken for itself. The terms of the investment reflected their eagerness to be associated with his inevitable success. "They're giving us 3 board seats," he said proudly, not realizing the significance. "Tobias, Stefan, and Margaret will be joining our current board. It's a great honor, shows how seriously they're taking this investment." "That's wonderful," I said, because it was. Wonderful for us, catastrophic for him. "There's some due diligence stuff," he continued dismissively. "Financial audits, document reviews, the usual corporate nonsense. Our lawyers will handle it. Nothing to worry about." Nothing to worry about. The forensic accountants who would soon be examining every dollar, every transaction, every suspicious transfer. The lawyers who would review every patent claim, every employment contract, every NDA. The investigators who would interview former employees, current staff, anyone with knowledge of how Novatech had really been built. Nothing at all to worry about. Harlan was as elegant as I remembered. We were shown to our table, not the private room where I'd plotted Damien's downfall just hours earlier, but the main dining room where other successful people celebrated their victories. The sommelier brought wine. The waiter recited specials in flawless German that Damien didn't understand, and I pretended not to follow. "To the future," Damien toasted, raising his glass. "To Novatech, to success, and to us." "To us," I echoed, and drank deep. The meal was exquisite, multiple courses of culinary artistry that Damien barely tasted in his excitement. He talked through dinner, sketching out plans for expansion, new products, market domination. Every sentence was I and my and mine. Never we or our, or acknowledgement of the dozens of people whose work had made any of it possible. "I've been thinking," he said over dessert. "Once this investment is finalized and the company is really flying, maybe you should quit working." I set down my fork carefully. "Quit?" "Well, you don't really need to work, do you?" He reached across the table to take my hand, his thumb rubbing across my engagement ring. "Once we're married, you can focus on making a real home for us. Maybe think about starting a family. You'd be a wonderful mother, Sophie. And honestly, having you in the office is becoming a bit complicated." "Complicated how?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he meant. "Just, people talk, you know, when the boss is dating his secretary. It raises questions about professionalism. I think it would be better for both of us if you stepped back. Let me handle the business side while you handle everything else. Everything else. Translation, domestic duties, social obligations, looking pretty at investor dinners. Being the supportive wife who asked no questions and made no demands and certainly never challenged her husband's authority. I see, I said quietly. You're not upset, are you? He looked genuinely confused. I thought you'd be happy. No more boring meetings, no more long hours at the office. You could do whatever you wanted with your days. Take classes, volunteer, have lunch with friends. It would be perfect. Perfect. Like the perfect trap I'd spent months constructing, waiting for exactly the right moment to spring it. Let's talk about it later, I suggested. Tonight is about celebrating your success. Our success, he corrected, but we both knew he didn't mean it. None of this would have been possible without your support, Sophie. I want you to know that. Even if you're not in the office, you're still such an important part of my life. Important. Not essential. Not equal. Not a partner in any meaningful sense. Just important enough to justify keeping around until a better option presented itself. I wondered if he'd already been planning when to trade up. If the 12 million euros came with thoughts of upgrading to a wife with better connections, better pedigree, better ability to advance his social standing. I wondered if he'd been mentally measuring me against other options, calculating my utility versus theirs. The thought should have hurt more than it did. I want to make a speech, Damien announced suddenly, standing with his wine glass in hand. The dining room wasn't busy enough for this to be truly mortifying, but there were enough other diners to make it performative. Excuse me, everyone? I'd like to share some wonderful news. Oh God, he wouldn't. He couldn't be that. Today, I secured a 12 million euro investment from one of Europe's most prestigious capital groups. His voice carried across the restaurant with practiced confidence. It's the validation of years of hard work, of vision, of believing in myself even when others didn't. And I couldn't have done it without this wonderful woman right here. He gestured to me, and I felt every eye in the restaurant turn my way. I arranged my face in an expression of proud embarrassment, the dutiful fiancé basking in reflected glory. Sophie has been my rock, Damien continued, warming to his theme. My support system, my inspiration. She's reminded me that success isn't just about money or power. It's about having someone to share it with. Someone who believes in you unconditionally. Unconditionally. Even when you're a fraud. Even when you're a thief. Even when you're actively planning to discard her the moment something better comes along. So I want everyone here to know, he said, his voice dropping to something approximating sincerity, that I am the luckiest man in the world. And Sophie, if you're willing to put up with my crazy schedule and my big dreams, I promise to make you the happiest woman in the world. Polite applause rippled through the restaurant. I smiled and waved and played my part flawlessly. Inside, I was counting down the days until I could stop performing, until I could look him in the eye and tell him exactly what I thought of his promises and his dreams, and his spectacular arrogance. 90 days, give or take. Just 90 more days of pretending. I could do 90 days. We left the restaurant near midnight, Damien still buzzing with excitement and wine. He drove us home, slightly over the limit but too confident to care, while I sat beside him and watched Hamburg's lights blur past. The city looked different at night, harder edged and more honest somehow, less willing to hide its sharp corners and dangerous places. "I love you," Damien said as we pulled into our building's garage. "You know that, right?" "I know," I said, because I knew exactly what he meant when he said love. I knew what it looked like when someone loved the idea of you rather than the reality, when they loved what you represented rather than who you were. "Come to bed," he said, pulling me close once we were inside the apartment. "Let's celebrate properly." I let him lead me to the bedroom, let him undress me with hands that thought they owned me, let him celebrate his victory with my body as the prize. I looked at the ceiling and thought about justice, about patience, about the moment when his world would finally collapse and I would be the one standing in the ruins, victorious. 90 days. I could survive anything for 90 days. Afterward, while Damien slept the satisfied sleep of the successful, I slipped out of bed and returned to the living room. My tablet glowed softly in the darkness, messages waiting from Stefan and Margaret and Tobias. Updates on the contract, questions about documentation, plans for the forensic audit that would begin in exactly 2 weeks. One message stood out from the rest, sent from an unknown number but with a signature I recognized. "Be strong, liebste Freundin. The wait will be worth it. K. Katrin." My oldest friend, reaching across the years of silence to remind me I wasn't alone in this. I typed back, "Danke. I'll see you at the end." "Wouldn't miss it," she replied instantly. "I'm bringing champagne. The good stuff. The kind we drank when we were 20 and thought we'd conquer the world." "We did conquer the world," I sent back. "We just did it quietly." "The best kind of conquest," she agreed. I put away the tablet and returned to bed, sliding carefully back under the covers beside Damien. He stirred slightly, reaching for me in his sleep, pulling me close with an arm that felt heavy and possessive across my waist. Tomorrow, he would wake up thinking he'd won, thinking his future was secure, his success guaranteed, his position unassailable. He would go to the office and start making plans for expansion, for growth, for all the ways he would spend Eisenhart Capital's investment. And I would wake up knowing that every day brought us closer to the moment when everything he'd built on lies would come crashing down around him. But tonight I let myself imagine it. The moment when Tobias would lay out the evidence, when Stefan would present the forensic accounting findings, when Margaret would read the list of charges. The moment when Damien would realize that his naive secretary spoke perfect German, came from serious money, and had been documenting his crimes for 18 months. The moment when he would understand that he'd never been the smartest person in the room. That moment was coming. And when it arrived, I would be ready. 90 days. Just 90 more days of being someone I wasn't, playing a role I'd perfected, maintaining a facade that grew more suffocating by the hour. I closed my eyes and dreamed of justice. Outside, Hamburg slept. But I could feel the city waiting, patient and implacable, for the storm that was building in boardrooms and law offices, and the careful documents being assembled by people who understood that revenge, properly executed, was an art form. Damien had made a critical error. He'd underestimated me, dismissed me, reduced me to something manageable and simple and easily controlled. He'd forgotten the most important rule of combat: never underestimate your opponent. And he'd never suspected that his opponent was the woman sleeping beside him, counting down the days until vindication. The 90 days collapsed into 72 hours. Not because I couldn't wait, though God knows the temptation to accelerate was overwhelming every time Damien casually mentioned my simple background, or suggested I might be happier doing something less demanding than office work. But because on day 4 of our carefully orchestrated countdown, Dr. Yuki Tanaka walked into Eisenhart Capital Group's Hamburg office with a lawyer, a forensic data analyst, and a flash drive containing 3 years of stolen correspondence. He's been selling the technology, Stefan told me over encrypted video call, his face grim. Not just using it without credit, actively selling it to Novatech's competitors. We found communication with 5 separate pharmaceutical companies, all dated within the last 18 months. He's been playing both sides, taking investment money to develop the diagnostic system while simultaneously licensing the core algorithms to companies that will compete directly with Novatech. I sat in the apartment's second bedroom, Damien's home office that I wasn't supposed to enter, surrounded by evidence I'd been collecting for months. How much? 2.3 million euros that we can document. Possibly more in cash transactions we haven't traced yet. Stefan's jaw tightened. Dr. Tanaka has emails, Sophie. Damien explicitly told her that her work would be credited, that she'd receive equity, that she was a valued partner. Then he forced her out, claimed sole invention, and started selling her algorithms before the patents were even finalized. Can we prove it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Stefan wouldn't have called unless he had something substantial. We can prove all of it. The forensic team has been through Novatech's servers. Damien's not particularly good at covering his tracks. He just assumed no one would look. We have the sales communications, the bank transfers, the patent applications with his name where hers should be. We have Benjamin Foster's original code with timestamps proving he wrote it 6 months before Damien claimed he developed it. We have Priya Chandran's clinical trial data with her signature, and Damien's later versions with her name removed. When? I asked simply. Tobias wants to move Friday, 3 days from now. Can you handle that? 3 days instead of 90. 3 days until I could stop pretending. Stop shrinking myself. Stop being the woman Damien wanted instead of the woman I was. I can handle it, I said. What's the plan? Board meeting. Emergency session called by the new investors to discuss irregularities discovered during routine due diligence. Damien will expect a minor accounting issue, maybe a request for additional documentation. Instead, he'll walk into a room with his victims, our lawyers, and enough evidence to bury him. I want to be there, I said immediately. We know. Tobias specifically requested your presence. He thinks you've earned the right to watch this play out. Stefan's expression softened slightly. Katrin's flying in tomorrow. She says she's not missing this for anything. After we disconnected, I sat in Damien's expensive ergonomic chair, paid for with money he'd stolen from the people who'd trusted him, and let myself feel the weight of what was coming. 3 days, 72 hours, then freedom. My phone buzzed. Damien, texting from the office 2 floors below. Forgot to mention, board meeting Friday at 10 a.m. Eisenhart wants to discuss next phase of investment. Shouldn't take long. Can you clear my afternoon just in case? I typed back, of course. Do you need me to prepare anything? No need. This is investor stuff, pretty routine. But maybe dress nice on Friday. First impressions matter, and I want the team to see I have excellent support staff. Support staff, not partner, not fiancé. Support staff. I'll look my best, I promised. I spent Wednesday gathering the last pieces of my own documentation. bank records showing the shell company investments that had kept Novatech afloat during its early days. Communications with Damien where he'd specifically requested funding without revealing our relationship to other investors. His own emails describing me as just an assistant to people who'd asked about my role in the company. Thursday, Katrin arrived. I met her at a cafe in Eppendorf, far from Novatech's offices, far from anywhere Damien might accidentally see us. She looked the same, tall, elegant, gray eyes that missed nothing. We hadn't seen each other in almost 2 years, not since I'd started dating Damien, and he'd gradually isolated me from my European connections. "Sophie," she said, pulling me into a fierce hug. "I've missed you, liebste Freundin." "I've missed you too," I said, and felt something crack inside me. The armor I'd been wearing for 18 months, the careful facade, the constant performance, it all suddenly felt impossibly heavy. "He's going to pay for what he did," Katrin said quietly. "Not just the fraud and theft, but for making you hide who you are, for making you small." We spent 3 hours planning Friday's confrontation over coffee that went cold while we talked. Katrin had brought copies of everything Eisenhart Capital had compiled, more than I'd even known existed. Testimony from 8 former Novatech employees, all describing the same pattern. Patent office records showing Damien's applications filed days after original inventors had submitted their initial research. Financial forensics tracing his illicit sales to competitor companies. "It's not just fraud," Katrin explained. "It's systematic intellectual property theft, breach of fiduciary duty, securities fraud for misrepresenting the company to investors, and probably a dozen other charges once the prosecutors really dig in. Uncle Tobias thinks he'll face at least 5 years in prison, possibly more." "Good," I said, and meant it. "And you?" Katrin asked gently. "How are you really?" I considered the question. How was I? Angry, certainly. Betrayed, absolutely. But also, surprisingly, relieved. The pretending had been exhausting, and knowing it was almost over felt like surfacing after being underwater too long. "I'm ready," I said finally. Ready to be myself again. Ready to stop hiding. Ready to watch him face consequences for once in his privileged life. "Then let's make sure tomorrow is everything you deserve," Katrin said, raising her fresh coffee cup in a toast. "To justice, to friendship, and to never making yourself small for a man who couldn't see your value." Friday morning arrived cold and bright. The kind of crisp November day that makes Hamburg's waterfront sparkle like something from a postcard. I dressed carefully, not in the simple, unassuming outfits I'd adopted as Damien's fiancé, but in the sharp Escada suit I'd worn to board meetings before I'd met him. My hair went up in a professional twist. My makeup was understated but authoritative. My shoes were Ferragamo, expensive and elegant, and exactly the kind of thing the old Sophie, the real Sophie, would have worn. I looked in the mirror and saw myself for the first time in 18 months. Damien was already gone when I emerged from the bedroom. He'd left early for breakfast with a potential client, completely unsuspecting that his world was about to implode. I took my time, making coffee, reviewing my notes one last time, breathing in the calm before the storm. At 9:30, my phone rang. "Stefan." "Everything's in place," he said. "Tobias, Margaret, and I are here. Dr. Tanaka, Benjamin Foster, and Priya Chandran arrived 10 minutes ago. Our lawyers are setting up in the conference room. Are you ready?" "I'm ready," I said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Sophie?" Stefan's voice was gentle. "Whatever happens today, whatever he says, Remember that you're worth more than he ever gave you credit for. I drove to the Steinmetz building for the last time as Damien's fiancé. Security waved me through. They knew me. The boss's girlfriend who occasionally dropped off forgotten documents or picked up lunch orders. I took the elevator to the 14th floor, where Novatech's offices occupied half the level, and walked past my own desk, the secretary's station outside Damien's office, without stopping. The conference room was at the end of the hall. Through the glass walls, I could see the assembled group. Tobias at the head of the table, imposing in a charcoal suit. Margaret beside him, reviewing documents with laser focus. Stefan setting up a laptop and projector. And the three victims, Dr. Tanaka, small and fierce in a navy dress. Benjamin Foster, young and nervous in a too-big blazer. Priya Chandran, her dark eyes burning with barely contained anger. Katrin stood by the windows, and when she saw me, she smiled. I pushed open the door. Frau Lindner, Tobias greeted me, using my real name for the first time in front of other people. Thank you for joining us. Please sit. He gestured to the seat directly across from where Damien would sit. The power position, the place where he'd see me first when he walked in. At 9:58, I heard his voice in the hallway, laughing with someone, confident and relaxed. The door opened. Damien walked in talking on his phone, not looking up. Yes, absolutely, we can discuss that next week. The Eisenhart deal is basically done. Just some formalities today. He looked up, saw the assembled group, saw me sitting in his conference room in a suit he'd never seen, my hair styled the way I used to wear it, my entire presence radiating the authority I'd been hiding for 18 months. He froze. Herr Whitmore, Tobias said coolly, switching to German. Bitte, setzen Sie sich. Please, sit down. Damien looked around, his brain clearly struggling to process what he was seeing. I don't understand. Sophie, why are you... Sit down, Damien, I said in perfect, unaccented German. Wir haben viel zu besprechen. We have much to discuss. His face went white. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered on the table. He sank into his chair like his legs had given out. You speak German, he said stupidly. Fließend, I confirmed. Fluently. I was born in Stuttgart. Spent the first 12 years of my life in Baden-Württemberg. My mother is German. My father's company manufactures industrial components throughout the German-speaking world. I attended university in Mannheim. But you never asked about any of that, did you? You just decided I was American, small town, insignificant. And I let you believe it. He looked at Tobias, desperately seeking familiar ground. Sir, I apologize for my fiancé's interruption. If we could discuss the investment terms. There are no investment terms. Tobias cut him off sharply. The 12 million euros we agreed to transfer has been frozen pending the results of our forensic investigation. An investigation that has uncovered significant criminal activity. Criminal? Damien's voice cracked. That's absurd. I've done nothing wrong. You've done everything wrong, Dr. Tanaka said quietly, speaking for the first time. You stole 3 years of my research, Damien. Filed patents in your name for algorithms I developed. Then you sold those algorithms to your competitors for millions of euros while telling investors the technology was exclusive to Novatech. That's not... Damien looked around wildly. Who are you people? What is this? I'm Yuki Tanaka. You forced me out of Novatech 18 months ago with a severance package and NDA that I'm now violating because your fraud voids all previous agreements. She slid a thick folder across the table. These are my original research notes, Time-stamped and verified. These are the emails where you promised me credit and equity. And these are the bank transfers showing you sold my work to 5 different companies for 2.3 million euros. Benjamin Foster stood next, his nervousness replaced by cold fury. I'm Benjamin Foster. You stole my code. Every line of the diagnostic software's core architecture was written by me, and you claimed you developed it yourself. I have the original files, the commit histories, the documentation proving I wrote it 6 months before you said you even started working on the project. Priya Chandran, the third victim said, her accent crisp and precise. You used my clinical trial data without permission or credit, removed my name from the research papers, presented my findings as your own to secure regulatory approval and investor confidence. I have testimony from 23 trial participants who can verify I conducted the research you claimed is yours. Damien's face had gone from white to gray. This is some kind of setup. Sophie, tell them this is crazy. It's not crazy, I said calmly. It's justice. And I'm not Sophie Barrett, your simple secretary from a small town. I'm Sophie Lindner, managing director of Lindner Industrial Partners. The mysterious initial investor in Novatech? That was my family's company. The shell corporations that kept you afloat when you were hemorrhaging money? Those were mine. Every euro you thought you'd earn through your genius was actually money I gave you while documenting your crimes. No, that's impossible. You're my assistant. You can't. I have 2 master's degrees, I continued, my voice never rising. One in business administration from Mannheim, one in industrial engineering from MIT. I speak German, English, French, and Spanish. I've been running my father's company since I was 25, and I've been playing you since the day we met. Why? He whispered. If you're so successful, so smart, why would you? Because I wanted to see who you really were, I said simply. When we met, I thought you might be different. Thought maybe you were actually brilliant, actually worthy of investment. So I tested you, presented myself as someone ordinary, someone you could feel superior to, and you showed me exactly what kind of man you are. Stefan opened his laptop. The projector hummed to life, displaying a spreadsheet that made Damien flinch. These are the financial records from Novatech's accounts, Stefan explained. The highlighted transactions show misappropriated funds, unauthorized sales, and fraudulent reporting to investors. We estimate you've stolen or misused approximately 7 million euros over the past 3 years. Stolen? Damien's voice was desperate. I built this company. Everything here is mine. You built it on stolen innovation and fraudulent claims, Margaret said coldly. You misrepresented yourself to investors, including us. You lied about the origin of your technology. You sold intellectual property that didn't belong to you. And you did it all while treating the actual creators as disposable obstacles to your success. Tobias stood, his presence dominating the room. Herr Whitmore, effective immediately, Eisenhart Capital Group is withdrawing all investment offers and terminating our relationship with Novatech Solutions. Furthermore, we are filing criminal complaints with the Hamburg Prosecutor's Office for fraud, intellectual property theft, and securities violations. Our attorneys estimate you'll face between 5 and 10 years in prison, plus substantial financial penalties. Prison? Damien looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. Sophie, please. You can't let them do this. I love you. We're getting married. This is just a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said, pulling off my engagement ring. The 3-carat diamond caught the light one last time before I set it on the table between us. You love the idea of me. The simple secretary, grateful for your attention, willing to disappear into your shadow. But that woman never existed. Everything was going to be different once we were married. He tried desperately. You were going to trade up. I interrupted. Find someone with better connections, better pedigree, more utility to your ambitions. I heard you, Damien. That very first day when you thought I couldn't understand German, you told the Eisenharts you'd drop me like a hot potato once the financing came through. He stared at me, comprehension finally dawning. You understood. That whole time you understood everything. Every word, I confirmed. Every insult, every dismissal, every casual cruelty you thought was private. I heard all of it, documented all of it, used it to build the case that's going to destroy you. The board will fight this, he said, grasping at straws. I have allies, connections. You have nothing, Stefan said flatly. The board was briefed yesterday. They voted unanimously to terminate you for cause and cooperate fully with the investigation. Your employment with Novatech Solutions ends today. Katrin finally spoke from her position by the window. Hello, Damien. We met briefly at that charity function last year. You probably don't remember me. I'm Katrin Eisenhart, Sophie's best friend from university. She smiled, cold and sharp. She told me once that she was dating someone brilliant and ambitious. I'm disappointed to find she was half right. This is insane, Damien said, but his voice had lost its conviction. I'm calling my lawyer. Please do, Tobias said. Your lawyer can meet you at the prosecutor's office. There are detectives waiting in the lobby to escort you there for questioning. Detectives? Damien's voice broke. You called the police? We reported multiple felonies, Margaret said. What did you expect? Damien looked around the room, seeing his escape routes closing one by one. His gaze landed on me, and for just a moment, I saw something like understanding in his eyes. You planned this. All of it. From the beginning. Not from the beginning, I corrected. At first, I genuinely wanted to see if you were worth investing in. But you showed me who you were, Damien. Showed me you were a fraud, a thief, and a man who would take credit for other people's brilliance while treating them as disposable. So yes, for the past 18 months, I've been planning this. Documenting everything, building the case, waiting for the perfect moment to watch you fall. You're vindictive, he spat, anger finally breaking through his panic. This is revenge. This is justice, Dr. Tanaka corrected quietly. Revenge would be doing to you what you did to us. This is simply ensuring you face consequences for your actions. 2 men in plain clothes appeared at the conference room door. Hamburg police, their badges visible on their belts. Herr Whitmore? The taller one said. We have some questions about financial irregularities at your company. We'd like you to come with us. Damien stood on shaking legs. He looked at me one last time, and I saw the moment he finally understood. The secretary he'd dismissed, the fiancé he'd planned to discard, the simple girl from a small town. She'd never existed. And the woman who had existed had been 3 steps ahead of him the entire time. I hope you're satisfied, he said bitterly. I'm satisfied that you'll face justice, I replied. I'm satisfied that Dr. Tanaka, Benjamin, and Priya will get the credit and compensation they deserve. I'm satisfied that your victims won't have to watch you profit from their work anymore. As for the rest, that's for you to work out with your lawyer and your conscience. The detectives escorted him out. We watched through the glass, Walls as they walked him past my old desk, past the office where he'd spent years taking credit for other people's brilliance, past the receptionist who stared in shock as her CEO was led away by police. When the elevator doors closed behind him, the conference room erupted. Dr. Tanaka burst into tears, not of sadness, but of relief. Benjamin Foster laughed, slightly hysterical. Priya Chandran just nodded, satisfied. Katrin came over and hugged me hard enough to hurt. "You did it," she whispered. "You magnificent, patient, brilliant woman. You did it." "We did it," I corrected, looking around the room at the people who'd helped make this possible. "All of us." Tobias cleared his throat. "There's one more matter to discuss. Novatech Solutions is now essentially rudderless. The board has requested that Eisenhart Capital Group take interim control to stabilize operations and ensure the technology reaches the market as intended. We'd like to propose a new management structure." He looked at me. "Frau Lindner, would you be interested in serving as CEO? Temporarily, of course, until permanent leadership can be established." I thought about it. Thought about the company Damien had built on stolen innovations, the technology that could genuinely help people, the 3 individuals in this room who deserve to see their work succeed. "On one condition," I said. "Dr. Tanaka, Benjamin, Priya, I want you as my executive team. Chief of Research, Chief Technology Officer, and Chief Medical Officer. Equity stakes, full credit for your innovations, and complete authority in your domains. This is your company as much as anyone's." Dr. Tanaka looked up through her tears. "You mean it?" "I mean it," I said. "Damien stole from you. I'm giving it back." "Then yes," Dr. Tanaka said. "Yes, I'll stay." "Me too," Benjamin agreed. "Absolutely," Priya said firmly. "Excellent," Tobias said. "Then I believe we have our new leadership team. Shall we discuss terms?" We spent the next 2 hours planning the restructuring. Eisenhart Capital would provide the funding Damien had lost, but with transparent terms and genuine partnership. Dr. Tanaka would lead the research team in developing the next generation of diagnostic technology. Benjamin would rebuild the software architecture properly, with credit and ownership. Priya would design clinical trials that met the highest ethical standards. And I would oversee it all, temporarily, until the company was stable enough to thrive without me. When the meeting finally ended, Katrine and I walked out together into the Hamburg afternoon. The city looked different now, cleaner, brighter, full of possibility instead of secrets. "What will you do now?" Katrine asked. "After the company stabilizes?" "Go home," I said. "Back to Stuttgart, back to my family's business. I've been playing a role for 18 months. Time to be myself again." "And what about your love life?" She grinned. "Any plans there?" I laughed. "I'm going to take a very long break from dating. Focus on work, on rebuilding my real life, on reconnecting with friends I lost." I bumped her shoulder. "Starting with you." "Deal," she said. "Though fair warning, my mother wants to have you over for dinner as soon as possible. She's been planning the menu since Uncle Tobias called her about today's meeting." "I'd love that," I said honestly. "Tell her I'll bring the wine." We walked to the waterfront, watching the boats on the Ulster and the people enjoying the unusually warm November day. I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged until it was gone. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. "Katrine's mother called. She says you were magnificent. When are you coming home?" I typed back. "Soon, Papa. Very soon." Another message, this time from Stefan. "Just heard from the prosecutor. They're charging him with 17 counts of fraud and IP theft. He's not getting bail. Thought you'd want to know." 17 counts. Enough to ensure Damien would face serious consequences, enough to send a message that fraud and theft had costs. Justice, Katrin said, reading the message over my shoulder. Real justice. Finally, I agreed. That evening, we celebrated at Katrin's family home in Blankenese, a beautiful old house overlooking the Elbe, full of warmth and laughter and people who knew exactly who I was. Margaret welcomed me like a returning daughter. Tobias toasted our success with wine that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to. Stefan told stories about Damien's face when he realized he'd been caught. And Katrin's mother, elegant and fierce, pulled me aside before dinner. My daughter tells me you made yourself small for a man who didn't deserve you, she said quietly. I hope you'll never do that again. Never again, I promised. I learned my lesson. Good, she said, squeezing my hand. Because women like you, women like us, we're not meant to be small. We're meant to be exactly as powerful as we are. I flew back to Stuttgart the next week, after ensuring Novatech's transition was progressing smoothly. My parents met me at the airport, and my mother cried when she saw me. Not because I'd been gone, but because I'd come back looking like myself again. Welcome home, Liebste, she said, holding my face in her hands. We missed you. I missed me too, I said, and we all laughed. The trial took 8 months. Damien pleaded guilty to 14 of the 17 counts in exchange for a reduced sentence. 7 years in prison, restitution to his victims, and permanent prohibition from serving as a corporate officer. He tried to claim he'd been influenced by pressure to succeed, that he'd made mistakes, but wasn't a criminal. The judge disagreed. I attended the sentencing with Dr. Tanaka, Benjamin, and Priya. We sat in the gallery and watched as the man who'd stolen their work, dismissed their contributions, and treated them as obstacles was finally held accountable. When it was over, when he'd been led away in handcuffs, we went out for coffee. How does it feel? Benjamin asked. Complete, Dr. Tanaka said, like a chapter finally closed. What's next for you? I asked. She smiled. Novatech's diagnostic system just received FDA approval. We're going into production next quarter. My name is on the patents, exactly where it belongs. I'd say that's a pretty good next chapter. To next chapters, Priya toasted, raising her coffee cup. To next chapters, we echoed. I returned to Lindner Industrial Partners the following month, resuming my role as managing director and slowly rebuilding the professional reputation I'd set aside to investigate Damien. It was easier than I'd feared. My work had spoken for itself before, and it spoke for itself again. But I'd changed. I no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. I knew my worth, knew my capabilities, knew I didn't need to make myself small to make others comfortable. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would never again hide who I was for someone who couldn't see my value. A year after Damien's sentencing, Novatech Solutions held a launch event for the diagnostic system that would carry Dr. Tanaka's name into medical textbooks. The technology she'd developed, that Damien had stolen, that we'd fought to reclaim, it was finally in the world, helping people, saving lives. I stood in the back of the room during her presentation, watching her receive the recognition she'd always deserved. Katrin stood beside me, along with my parents, who'd flown in for the occasion. You should be up there too, Katrin said. You saved this company. I just gave it back to the people who built it, I replied. This is their moment. But afterward, when Dr. Tanaka left the stage, she found me in the crowd. Thank you, she said simply, for believing us, for fighting for us, for making sure justice happened. "Thank you," I replied, "for being brave enough to come forward, for refusing to let him win, for showing me what real courage looks like." She hugged me then, and I felt the last piece of the anger and betrayal I'd been carrying finally dissolve. Damien had taken from all of us our work, our trust, our sense of safety. But in the end, we'd taken it back. Together. That night, over dinner with my family and the Eisenharts, someone asked if I regretted the 18 months I'd spent playing a role, pretending to be someone I wasn't. I thought about it carefully. "No," I said finally, because it taught me something important. It taught me that patience is powerful, that justice takes time, that sometimes the longest road is the one that leads to the most complete victory. And it taught me that I'm stronger than I knew, strong enough to wait, to plan, to endure temporary discomfort for permanent resolution. "Well said," my father agreed, raising his glass. "To patience, to justice, and to my brilliant daughter, who never forgot who she was even when she had to pretend to be someone else." "To Sophie," everyone echoed. I smiled and drank the wine and looked around the table at the people who'd stood by me, who'd helped me, who'd believed in justice even when it seemed impossibly far away. Damien had thought I was simple, insignificant, easily controlled. He'd thought my family was ordinary, my capabilities limited, my value determined by how well I supported his ambitions. He'd been wrong about all of it. And in his wrongness, in his arrogance and his certainty that he was always the smartest person in any room, he'd handed me every tool I needed to ensure his destruction. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always swift. But when it came with patience and planning and the support of people who refused to let fraud go unpunished, it was absolutely worth the wait. I thought about Damien sometimes, serving his sentence in a German prison, finally facing consequences for his actions. I wondered if he'd learned anything, if he understood yet what he'd done wrong, if he grasped that his downfall hadn't been my vindictiveness, but his own arrogance. Probably not. Men like Damien rarely learned. They blamed everyone but themselves, convinced that the world had been unfair, that they'd been the victims of circumstance rather than the architects of their own destruction. But that was no longer my concern. My concern was the future, the company I was building with my family, the friendships I was rebuilding, the life I was living as exactly who I was, without apology or compromise. And that future looked bright. Very bright indeed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.